Hey guys, so in this series of videos I'm talking about 14 layers of strategy as applied to river flows in U. And in general on this channel I'm trying to empower everybody to advance at the piano with maximum quality, efficiency, and independence through strategy. And today it is the final layer out of these 14 layers, right? It's layer number 14. As I've said all throughout this entire series, I often will talk about dozens, even hundreds of layers of strategies and mindsets within my teaching. These are just 14 arbitrary ones. It could have been different ones, could have been in a different order. There are many, many more strategies and concepts than this. As I've said a few times, for instance, we didn't even talk about musicality, really, mental practice, my physical methodology, like details in terms of my logistical methodology, top-level strategy and all that. But this is just like sort of like a sample of a way in which you can start incorporating strategies into your practice. And if one's going well, then, as I've said before, you can then incorporate a second. And then you can add on to that a third, as opposed to losing the benefit of the first, which is what typically happens when you only use tips and tricks in some kind of haphazard fashion. So I think today the best thing that we can do is probably just get into like some practice sample, building upon what we've done the last few times as soon as possible, and I'm sure I'll end up reviewing these other 13 layers somehow naturally in the process. Because the purpose of the logical methodology, I'm doing some performance practice, there's some other stuff here. A big part of the purpose of the logical methodology is to seamlessly combine all of these different things. Like, when I've been in case you were wondering, I don't have a specific lesson plan for these videos, so I'm not thinking to myself I hope I remember the rule of expansion, or I hope I remember like how to add and reverse for both hands. It's really just it's more or less an automatic reaction at this point, because they're more or less unchanging principles within this method. There's always exceptions, but they are sort of like the fundamental they're like the basics of the method. So it'll make it extremely easy to remember as long as you're applying these ideas on a regular basis. You won't have to think about them so individually. So I think that I'll just go ahead and write it over here. We're just going to talk about alternation and cycling. And I covered this in another video as well, just on its own, alternation and cycling. There's also a sort of related concept. I talk about spaced reconstruction in fast piano progress in another video. You can YouTube that if you want as well. So alternation and cycling, the general idea is something I already hinted at way back when I talked about adding in reverse. It's the idea that when you carry out a strategy, you don't just stop using the strategy after you've done the thing once. Adding in reverse being an excellent example in general, and of course, the adding in reverse for both hands. If you practice the very end of something, and then I'll just show you in the actual piece now, right, in River Flows in U. So, let's see, oops. Let me, there we go. So, let's say that we use the adding in reverse strategy to solve this one measure set over here, right, from here to here. If we were to do that, let's say we do the last quarter measure set, the last half, the last 3/4, and the whole thing. It could be either separate or both, it doesn't really matter. So most people, if they mess up in the beginning, they're going to probably just play from the beginning over and over again. They'll just stop you. They'll be like, I already used adding in reverse, so now I'm going to play from the beginning, and then play the end wrong, and then play from the beginning, and then play the end wrong. And then they'll be like, David, I did what you asked in terms of adding in reverse. And then I'll observe their practice and see them do it once and one time only, and then play the beginning right and the ending wrong, 30 times. so it's the principle, it doesn't stop. It doesn't it's not permanently solved. You have to continue using that principle, otherwise you'll fall right back into over prioritizing the beginning again, right? So this is a clear illustration of that. So rather than that happening, if this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3, and then this is step 4, hypothetically. The practice is a lot more like, actually, I should emphasize this because I didn't mention it so much when I was talking about adding in reverse too. It's not so much like we do the last quarter measure set, and then we do like the last half measure set, the blue. And then we do like the last 3/4 measure set, the green originally was. And then we do try the whole thing. And then if we mess up, then we do like the last quarter measure set. And then we do like the last half measure set. And then we do the last 3/4. And then we do the whole thing. I mean, it could be like that. You could just run through each of the 4 steps in order, neatly like that. But it often isn't really exactly like that. It might be that you just do like the last, like 8th measure set, last quarter. Start from the beginning again. Maybe you messed this up, last quarter. Maybe the last half. Start from the beginning again. Last quarter. Start from the beginning again. Last quarter. Last half. Maybe just the last 8th. Last quarter. Start from the beginning. Last quarter. Last half. That's enough. So there can start to be more rapid alternation, going, rapidly between 2 different things, and cycling, I think those are the technical definitions. Like cycling can be between like 3 or more different things. Alternation is typically between 2 things, but really it's the same general sort of idea, right? So, and then sometimes you don't need to play literally all the way through to the end. It depends on the context. So, so that's the general idea there. And I'm just going to do one last little sample of practice here. So if I'm just starting my practice for the day, I am not warming up. I'm not practicing other sections or anything first. I'm just going to do a sample performance now. So let's see if I can move this over. Okay, so I'm going to try to play this from memory, simulating what it's like to be a student. So a little bit different than the other sample performances that I did. Pretty weak start. I mean, it was sort of okay. Then it kind of went off the deep end. It seemed like I was like kind of totally lost. And then I recovered, which is good. I was like, oh, okay. So that was actually good on the part of this hypothetical student. But at the end, I really kind of lost it. I really didn't know what was next. I had no backup plan. I didn't even have a plan really for where I was supposed to end. Normally you should always decide where are you intending to play up to, because you're trying to fake your way there even if you mess up. And if you really can't make it there, you're supposed to gracefully kind of trail off and then take, just be there for a moment, take your hands off slowly, sit there for 2 or 3 seconds, maintain your composure. Instead what I did was kind of like fumble a little bit, and then I sometimes students will just go like that. They'll just be like, they'll just, like, I give up, like their body language. I mean, they might also literally talk, but basically they've given up on the performance. So if I have a teacher, hopefully they could give me helpful feedback along those lines. If I don't, I should tell myself, like, oh, that wasn't really good performance demeanor. You might think that doesn't really matter, because it's like we don't have to be like super proper, pompous classical musicians. But really, if you practice maintaining your composure at the end, if somebody asks you to play, it will be so much more enjoyable for them to listen to. If you want to impress them, they will be so much more impressed. If you don't even care about that, well, they'll enjoy it more if they're your family member, loved one, etc. So anyway, so I'm starting with that. That's kind of like some sample performance comments. And then let's try to go right into the practice. Maybe today I'm like kind of tired from work or something, and I'm just like, oh man, I don't really have the energy to do these like both hand sets. I'm pretty tired, so I think I'm just going to do some small sets on the frontier here, some new material. So let's try to do that. Let me try to do this half measure set from here to here. Let's do it. Okay. Now, if I'm a good student, I would remember to do like add and reverse this area, right? So maybe I'll play the last 3 notes, which could just be, let's see, it could just be from here to here, possibly. So I might play like, right? And then maybe I'll try doing this, and it might be like, okay, and then for some reason, if I try to do this, and I totally can't remember how to do it, I might make the executive decision like, okay, you know what? I'm too tired. I'll just do quarter measure sets, which is fine, because that wasn't so bad. And yeah, and then it looks like at least I did something. And then I'm like, okay, I'm doing quarter measure sets. Well, I still got to do this one. So I can start with this, it's technically an 8th measure set. Those 3 notes there. Maybe I'll start from 1 note before that, this part over here. Oh, by the way, I need to change this into a separate handset marker. I did that by accident, but that's okay. Okay, so now I did this entire section here, this quarter measure right hand set. I'm going to go ahead and update. So I did this quarter measure right hand set, I did this quarter measure right hand set. I also already did this because from here to here is literally the exact same as from there to there. This last one, which is this part plus the next note, this fingering is different, therefore I didn't actually solve that yet. Let's assume that I get that without too much incident, right? Okay, let's say that somehow I get that, then I'll mark it. Okay, and let's say that I go over my left hand in the same way, I'm able to like, so that seemed fine. Maybe I'll play from here to here, this 5 to 5 here. Alright, so I even added that little part in reverse, and I can mark this quarter here. Right, so perhaps what ends up happening is I end up solving these quarter measures separate hand sets. Because I was actually so tired, I could have also stayed longer in the right, but I'll kind of, go along with that example. And then maybe, I'm feeling a little bit better, and I'm much more refreshed now. Maybe I solve more separate hand sets on the frontier, those tiny little sections. But I've woken up, I had some energy drink or whatever, and now I'm ready to go back and start combining some of these sets. So I see I have these 2 half measure both hand sets here. I need to try to increase them into a 1 because of the rule of expansion. I already had made another attempt before. So it should be okay. And so I'm going to start practicing now, and I'm going to add using that adding and reverse strategy for both hands. I might play from here to here with the right hand, and then I might do from here to here, and then both. And then maybe I'm then trying the entire measure, right hand alone, left hand alone, and then both. So let's go ahead and try that, starting with this right hand. So it might be I'm doing this purple, and I'm going like, Okay, now I'm doing this next thing, this left hand. Let's assume I have some trouble with this. I might even just do the last part from the G sharp to the last note in that left hand purple. And maybe I need to alternate between these two. I need to play this and then try to maybe do the last three notes. Even to get that left hand half measure set, I alternated and then cycled between these different areas so many times, right? And then maybe I do both. So ending there. Maybe I'll have the right. Okay, so even within what these areas that I'm talking about, maybe there's still even smaller practice within that. Okay, then I got this yellow. Let's assume this is okay. Maybe I missed this. How about just doing that ending? Okay. I forgot the ending. Okay. Okay. And then I've got the left hand. You know what? I get a feeling I don't remember the ending. I'm going to do this again. Just the very ending of the purple on the left hand. Right here, the last three notes. Okay. Try from the beginning again. I don't really remember that. Okay. I'm going to go over the very ending again. Maybe the last three notes. Okay. Maybe I'll play from here. Maybe the ending. And the whole left hand. That's better. And then, of course, I have both hands. And I'll give it a go. Okay. Let's do just that left hand, that ending there. Right? The purple and the left. Review the right. Both. From the beginning. Purple. Both hands. Beginning. Left hand one. Both hands. Beginning. Ending. Beginning. So that's just one typical example of adding in reverse both hands, right? Separate them both for each step. Kind of a 6-step process, but even within each step, there can be strategy within that. And we're rapidly alternating between all of these different areas. All of this can happen, honestly, even faster than what I just demonstrated if the student starts to become very used to these ideas. And it's not random. I'm following the principles again. I'm going to the weak areas. It's not enough only to go to the weak areas. You also want to just remember this bias towards the beginning. Remember how we constructed things together in the first place, right? So all of that thinking together, a more nuanced adding in reverse separate than both for each step, has resulted in a very good one measure both hand set. So that would be my thinking behind solving that. And then from there, I could increase these into a one measure set because the rule of expansion, there's two of the same size set next to each other, therefore they should increase to the next order of magnitude. You should try to increase them no matter what. Maybe this one we also increase into a 1, or we make an attempt at it. Rule of transition. We have two one measure separate hand sets here. I think it's a good time to transition into both hands. We need to do that at least a 2-to-1 ratio. So here we'll do half measure both hand sets. So let me just literally update this for the sake of clarity. Let's see here. So again, rule of expansion. We'll increase these into ones. Let's assume that they're both successful. And then here, we have these one measure separate hand sets. We will transition 2-to-1 ratio from 1 into half. In this case, halves. We'll end up doing these two half measure both hand sets, probably solving using a strategy similar to that entire thing that I just demonstrated, that entire example. Same thing here, rule of transition from one measure separate hand sets into half measure both hand sets, each one of which probably would have been solved by adding quarter measure sets in reverse separate and then both for each step, and if I'm smart, being more nuanced about it and making observations, doing alternation and cycling. And then here, these quarter measure separate hand sets I solved earlier because I was so tired. By the rule of expansion, I would have to increase them into half measure separate hand sets. And then I can start planting more seeds on the frontier, planting more quarter measure sets on the frontier here. Because as you can see, like, we need time for things to come to fruition. If you're smart about it, your long-term investments will be paying off continuously. Oh, it takes like 6 weeks for things to go from scratch to like a 4-measure set. So that means if the first line took 6 weeks, then the next line will also take 6 weeks. So 4 lines, that'll take, 24 weeks, right? Because each one takes 6 weeks. But not if you've been working on the second line for 5 weeks already. Not if you've been working on the third line for 4 weeks already, right? So that goes beyond the scope of this video, but that's just one sample of, what it would be like if you started to think about more sophisticated long-term planning in terms of like a staggered method. I do talk about global and staggered spaced repetition in another video from a while back. What if you wanted to play this quite a bit faster, right? That's something that I can talk about in my physical methodology. Metronome practice, altered rhythms for attaining great speed and virtuosity. What if you want to become much more aware, right? Mental practice in terms of, just conscious awareness of everything that's going on, much stronger memory and so on. What if you want to, right, what if you want to add much more nuance, musicality to your playing? A lot of my logistical methodology goes into that in terms of planning and so on, right? So it's just a little bit of a sample of no exaggeration when I say there are many more layers than just these, but it's a good way to step into it. You could have started from, well, I guess it probably makes sense to play things to quality. For all the fancy strategies and so on, it means very little if the component puzzle pieces are weak or they're iffy. So, but, we could have talked about, like, memorizing from the beginning, first. Just memorize from the beginning. Like, I didn't even talk about like spaced repetition or anything. We could have started with, this ultimate technical principle. That's too bad that that E was erased. So, let's see. I don't know what exact shade or color that was, but it's okay. We could have talked about relaxation first. Just relax more in your playing overall. Sometimes we'll start with that. So again, the order is arbitrary, but this is one really good way to get started. So let's see if we covered everything. We're starting with separate hands. We did even quarter measure separate hand sets here. We didn't really do that slow, but you go as slow as necessary. We're observant. We don't misread the notes. We do it to a very high quality. We went very small. We did quarter measure separate hand sets. We sometimes broke things down even smaller than that. Always have an overlapping note because of sets in my logical methodology. All the fingerings is written out beforehand. We're doing spaced repetition, not just doing things over and over again masked, but moving on and then coming back every time that we relearn. It is strengthening our long-term memory because of the cognitive effort of retrieval. And we're then going to be able to apply like some of these other ideas when we come back, because of the spacing in between. It's stronger in our brains, so now we can combine them to larger sections, into more complex coordinations. Logical notation is keeping track of all the work that we've done so far. That's all the little markings and brackets that you saw to keep track of our work. Adding reverse, definitely you saw an example of. Simple adding reverse, like separate hands, would just be doing the last quarter measure set, last half measure set, last 3/4 measure set, entire 1 measure set, for instance. Rule of expansion I showed you an example of. Rule of transition we saw an example of. Adding reverse for both hands we saw an example of. We didn't talk that much about memorizing from the start and the ultimate technical principle of relaxation. In this video, gave plenty of examples last time, but basically every single set that I am practicing, I am playing from memory, including the very, very small ones, and I am making sure to relax at the ends of each of them. But for students, it's a very good idea to hold the last note of whatever it is that you're playing and then relaxing everything completely there. So yeah, so in terms of incorporating these layers, admittedly, you might not have time to relax for like 30 seconds at the end of every single one of them, but even just a few seconds of thought or a second of thought, it can make a very significant difference. So I think that's really good to keep in mind, although that wasn't the focus of this particular video. We did performance practice, and then of course we went pretty deep into alternation and cycling examples. So yeah, hope that you found this series helpful, useful, interesting in terms of how you can begin to layer strategy in your playing. I'm going to start going to probably some other topics that I haven't talked about in a while. Let me know what you want to hear about. Do you have questions? Do you have thoughts? Do you have other topics that you're dying to know about? And let's see. Yeah, please like, subscribe, let others know about the channel, and let me know what it is that you want to hear about. Happy to dive into new topics, and looking forward to the next video as always.